So the first stage of animation that we're going to explore is called layout. And layout is the process of figuring out what is where and when. I know that sounds pretty broad, but that's what the real point of it is, right? If I were going to try to draw a picture of a character standing next to a car in front of a tree, right? The first thing I might do is just very loose, like gestures to figure out like roughly here's where the car, roughly here's where the tree, roughly here's where the character is, right? And I would do that really quickly because it's a lot easier to make those big changes early. I'm not going to start drawing a detailed eye on the character, not knowing where the car is going to be, right? I need kind of a visual of where everything is going to be. And so that's the animation equivalent, right? I need to know, roughly when is this arm going to pop out? When is Winslow going to be scared? When do I need to make a camera cut? Right? And that process is called layout. It's actually an entire job that people can do in the industry. And what it does is it allows us to get like a roughed in version of the animation before we really even start worrying about the details. So the trick to layout is to be to not get lost in the details, right? I'm going to go ahead and start sort of setting up my basis for this a little bit at a time. Oh, and my buttons are gone because I had a Maya crash. So I'm going to go ahead and recreate those buttons really quickly. And through the power of editing, now we were able to see that those buttons are back. And so now I have a button to select all of Winslow, all of the arm, and I didn't make a button for the ship because the ship is actually just one control. I will say there's also the crate, and right now I don't know that I want to select a crate. I'm pretty happy with where it's at, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in its own group again. So I can grab this crate group, or sorry, its own layer. We'll go ahead and do crate layer. And again, the reason I'm doing this is so I don't accidentally select it. It just makes picking things a little easier. So the first thing I want to do is figure out roughly how quickly and when the arm pops up out of the box, right? So I'm going to select the arm, and I'm just going to go ahead and start trying to key that in. So I know I want to, let's go ahead and have it up by 25. But here I'm going to go ahead and try to see if I can scrunch it in a little bit. So maybe I'll do something like this. And a little bit of a trick here. The box is we can't see the bottom of the box. So there's nothing really that says we can't just move this underground, right? Pop it up out of the top of the box sort of magically, right? And so if I hit S on that, then now I get this popping up here. I actually want it to go up higher than that and eventually be kind of more curled over and threatening. So let's see what this looks like animated. Watching from this camera's viewport. Okay, it's a little too slow. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the arm, and I have this keyframe here. I'm just going to duplicate it by middle mouse clicking and dragging. And you'll notice that if I do that, nothing updates. On the viewport, nothing is changing. So that means if I move out to 15 and hit S, I'm going to be setting a keyframe on frame 15 with the object in the same location as it was on frame 0. So it's a way of kind of copying the key and making that happen a little faster. Right? Just to kind of give myself a little bit of an overshoot here. I'm going to hit 0 on that to zero all the rotations out, and that way it can go up a little higher and just kind of make this feel a little more exaggerated. So let's say we get, there we go. Now, I want to make sure I'm playing at the right speed, because this can be a big issue at this level. Right click, playback speed, and I want to make sure, this is very important, that this is set to real time. And so if I hit play, that's what it's going to look like. Now, I'm going to have Winslow sort of over here doing something else. I'm not exactly for sure what yet. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. And also, I'd set the head to global earlier. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back. And I'm going to go ahead and just get him in a pose. Twist the lower body, twist the upper body. Have him over here. And so I can always bring other objects in later. So I may decide to do that.
Okay.
Oh, where's the eye at? There we go. I also want to set the eye. I don't know if I want the eye to be not follow up. I do want it to follow the head a little bit. So we can have Winslow over here looking at something on the ground. Maybe, I don't know, I may come up with a new object to import in. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Also want to go ahead and open his eye a little bit here, make him feel like he's thinking, right? But I'm not overly posing him. I'm just getting kind of roughly where he needs to be, right? And this is his starting point. That doing a little bit of something better. Right? And so I'm going to select all of Winslow, go ahead and hit S on that. And now I have auto key turned on. Whether you're animating with auto key or not is sort of your own call, but I like to animate with it. I'm going to go ahead and keep him in this pose for a little while until this happens, and then I'm going to have him, because he's reacting to this, right? I'm going to have him kind of dart his head up. And again, I'm not doing a whole lot of work in terms of how detailed this animation is. I just want to get a rough idea. But I took his head too far there. Okay. Open his eye pretty big. So let's see what we got here. Okay. And again, select all of Winslow and hit S. So now we get this. And I want him to kind of hold that pose for a little while and then be surprised, okay, and be shocked. And that's going to be sort of this cartoony, exaggerated pose. I'm going to go and grab these three, maybe the head, neck, and zero that out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn him with these two this way a little bit more. There we go. And then I'm going to lift him up with these two. Right? And then stretch them out here. And really open up his eye. Okay. Then select all of Winslow. Something like that. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to have him hold that a little bit before coming back down to the ground, much more like this pose. So I'm actually just going to borrow this pose. Middle mouse click on 50, drag that out to 68. But I want him to land a little bit more facing the ship already. Right. So we'll go ahead and rotate him around a little bit, rotate this around a little bit. There we go. Maybe even lean him toward that ship. Oh, that is something like this. There we go. So I think it's a round frame. Well, let me select that. Winslow, hit S. I'm going to go ahead and move that frame out to about 70. So I think it's a round frame 70 that I want to do a camera cut. There we go. So it's a little harder to see over here with these controls. So if I go to show, and then I can choose viewport, I can actually uncheck NURBS curves. And you see Alt-1 is also the shortcut key for that. And that'll let me watch it over here in this viewport in the way that, without having the controls. So around frame 70, I'm going to cut to the other camera. Now, I will say Maya has some tools to allow you to handle camera cuts and where the cameras are. And maybe we'll do a bonus video on that later, but right now it actually adds more complication to it than is necessary. What I usually would like to do is just know where my camera cuts are. And so I maybe would do highlighting this entire region up to frame 69, right click, and there is an option in here that's called time slider bookmarks. And I'm just going to create one, and we'll make it this red color, and we'll call it shot 1, and hit create. You'll see I have this little red area now that lets me see this is shot 1. And so that lets me know that right here, I would want to switch over to camera 2. And so from here, I can figure out what to do on camera 2 throughout this entire thing. So I am going to select the ship and go ahead and have the door all the way open at the very beginning of this. So again, I think it's frame where it's around 126, something like that. That's open, right? And so I can animate from here. Oh, interesting. I moved my crate and now I can't see the crate in this shot. So I may go ahead and unlock my camera and move it over this way just a little bit more. And back just a little bit more. Yeah, I like that framing better. Lock it. So this is where I'm going to do my jumps. So I'm going to select Winslow again. I'm going to try to get in here and get him cleaned up a little bit on this rotation on 70. I'm going to get him turned this way a little bit more. Eventually need him turned completely this way. Yeah. There we go. And I probably need to go ahead and anticipate down. So we're going to have him land in anticipation, right? So we talked about the squash and stretch on the bouncing ball, right? And that's what we're going to be doing here as well. We're going to be doing just a little bit of that same feel, right? So when my character, that cleaned up, there we go. So when my character is squashing, they're building up that energy, right? And so I want to have him land in the first squash pose. We'll make sure that looks okay from the first camera. Yeah, that's all right. Panel perspective, go up to 2. Also, if I turn off my lights in this viewport, does it just make it go dark? No, that actually helps. So you can kind of see it a little bit better here. You can even hit 5 if you want to, if that helps you rendered a little bit better. Or if it's like rendering is too dark, something that some people will do is under lighting, they will say, is it use flat lighting? There we go. And so you can see it a little bit better. And so some people like to do that, just so in the viewport you can see it a little more clearly. I'm going to go ahead and just keep using my normal lights. So we've got my squash pose and select Winslow. So for layout, I mainly just need to see how, because we'll go back and animate the jumps later. I need to see where he is at during this whole thing, right? So let's just do, and we're going to be redoing some of these poses later. So let's do like 10 frames. I am going to move him. Okay, so let's talk about this. So if I have both of those selected and I want to move them together, I'm getting some weird results, right? And that's because I am currently moving them in local axis. So if I hold down W, click, and change this to world, now I will be able to move them both in the world axis, and I can slide them pretty easily. And so I'm just going to do like a very simple attempt at this. Maybe let him go there a little bit further. Second jump. Higher. And then maybe have him anticipate a little longer here on this, and this big jump into the ship. Like, so I want to do this. I probably should have had him land a little more like that. Yeah. And then big jump into the ship. Let's go and delete that one and just create a new one. I'm going to have him kind of dive into the ship. So let's go. And it's going to feel broken for just a little while. That's okay. Grab his head. Q. I zero all that out. And there we go. So for him to be in the ship, and I'm just gonna move him all the way into the ship. So he jumps into the ship. What he actually does in the ship isn't as important. That's how he lands in there. And so what I should get now is this jump through here. Just to make it more interesting, I'm going to go ahead and stretch him out and do sort of some of the jump so we can kind of see it a little bit better in the animation. So let's see how that looks, starting from frame 70. Pretty good. I'm going to so I realize I've not been setting keyframes on everything on Winslow, so let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to hit S. The greater than, less than keys will let me step through, so greater than S. I don't think I meant to set that one. There we go. And then on this one, I will go ahead and tuck them all the way in a little bit more. So now onto the ship. So the ship doesn't really do anything until after Winslow's in here. We're going to have to extend our timeline out. I'll go ahead and drag it out to 200 for right now, but let's see if it may require more than that. So Winslow's in the ship by about frame 115. Now let's watch that and see if that timing feels right. Maybe, but I think this wait here is a little too long and this jump is a little too slow. So let's make that jump a little faster. I'm going to highlight everything and scale this closer. And you'll notice I get these little dotted lines on my keyframes. So I'm going to undo that because that means that it's setting those keyframes on partial frames instead of whole frames. So I'm going to right click on my timeline and say auto snap keys. And so now when I scale this, it'll be dotted until I release it. And then it'll try to line them up. And I can make this a little closer. And so let's see what that looks like. Okay. I think that works pretty good. Honestly, I also think that he's probably floating in the air, afraid a little too long. So let's go ahead. And I'm just kind of doing this. Well, does that mess up our camera cut? Let's do that. We could do that and just change where the camera cut is, or just leave it. Let's leave it for right now. We'll think about that later. Yeah, I don't think it's too long. Okay, so that means our next action is happening at 103. Right, that's when we're in the ship. Now, Winslow doesn't really need any animation after this. So once he's in there, it's all the ship. So this is where I'm going to make the first keyframe on my ship. Hit S. And I'm going to have that door maybe a little bit later. Give it just like a beat. Set another key. And then very quickly, I'm going to slam that door shut. 0. So let's see what that looks like. Jump in. There we go. And now once that's shut, now it's time for our ship to take off. So I want to, again, set a keyframe on everything. And then I'm going to very quickly anticipate down with a squash. And I'm going to hold that squash for a little while. Actually, I'm going to take it to 100%. I'll do like 1.1, and that way it gives me just a little longer to build up to that 1.2.
Yeah.
That's what that looks like. There we go. So the longer we anticipate, the more anticipation it'll have. And then the faster the reaction, the more it sort of pays off on that anticipation. So I'm going to have the stretch happen really pretty quick, like maybe like 2 or 3 frames after that. So I'm going to have it sort of pop up, but it's not going to stretch out nearly as long. And I don't want it to just like zoom off the page, right? I'm going to have it, because we're going to have some like flames under here later. I'm going to have it sort of stretch and then sort of come up to meet it with that. Let's just make sure we got a keyframe on everything. I do not. Let me see. Greater than, less than. Okay. So I'm going to have it pop up by about, say, 145. And I'll 0 that out. So we're no longer doing that. And then I'm going to move that rocket ship up in the air. Something like this. Maybe a little bit of a sideways motion. Right? And then as it starts to fall back down, we can bend it a little bit. Actually, let's add that bend later. But I can bend it. I'm going to go ahead and anticipate backward this way. with another squash. And I'm going to not squash quite as much. I want to give it more time to squash. I'll settle back. Add a little bit more squash. And then a quick zoom off screen. We'll do a stretch. Rotate that up. And then very quickly zoom off screen. Okay. So let's see what that looks like. Okay. Not bad. And I think when we have our other shot in there as well, maybe we even can cut back to some stuff. We can show it in a couple of different ways. But I think that this is going to allow us a good spot or a good way of seeing how this this action takes place. So my second half of this, my shot is pretty much over by about 185. So I'll make that the end of my shot, 185. And I'm going to highlight from 70 all the way to the end. I'm holding down Shift and then right click and say time slider create. And I'll make this one blue or purple. Shot 2. Create. And all that really does is just remind me that when it comes time to render or play blast, I'm going to render and play blast those sections to see those shots. So in order to see those pretty quickly, I can play blast shot 1. So I highlight that same region. I'm going to do that again. I missed. There we go. So that should be, I can missed it again. 369. There we go. And then I can right click on that and hit Play Blast Options box. I'm going to change this to WebM. That's good. And I need to change that from Windows to from render settings. Doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and do from window right now. And I want to save this file. I'm going to call this shot 1. Say layout shot 1. Play blast. Now, if I want to see it in the right format, because you notice that was kind of square with this gray around it, I can turn off temporarily my resolution gate and right click and play blast that and do that from render settings. And yes, I'm going to overwrite it. And so now I have that I can see. And then I can highlight the second half. So I'll want to change that back to camera 2. Turn that off just for a second. Right click, play blast, play blast,